All right. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone, from wherever you're joining from. Good morning, good evening, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Akin Akinbusoye. I'll be the MC for this event. Today, we'll be looking at um, proactive networking. And Mike, could you please go to the opening slide?
Sure.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. The session is about proactive networking, and it's going to be an engaging and insightful session. Today, Mike will be the one leading us in this conversation. Before we proceed, you can send in a chat telling us where you're joining from. That would be nice. And someone is in the background taking this, and this will help us in our other planning engagement as well. So, like I said, Mike Palladino is a good friend of the house, and he's a director of enterprise agility. I don't know if you've been in one of his sessions on agile Lego. That was my first encounter with Mike, and it was an insightful engagement. Prior to now, he has had so many engagements, both in the UK, in the US, outside, in some other countries in Europe, on agile project management, as well as this topic we'll be discussing today. I'm going to leave the floor to Mike to take on the presentation. And after that, we're going to engage in questions and answers. Thank you, Mike. Over to you.
Great. Thanks, all. Yeah, appreciate the invitation to come speak today. Really going to just share some. I used to share these stories just with colleagues and as I travel, and people kept saying, you need to put this into a presentation. There's some really interesting thoughts here. So really excited to share what does proactive networking mean and how can I apply that to my job and to my life in general. So we're going to talk a bit about why is networking important? What is it? What are the different types? I'm going to share some personal experiences, things that really surprised me as I went through this journey over the past 10 years or so. And what were some of the things that I learned through this process? What was really amazing when I started looking up some of the statistics, I found some rather shocking numbers. Didn't realize they were this high. 70%. That's the percentage of jobs that are never actually published. Never thought about it that it was that high. We're always so used to thinking in terms of finding a job, looking at websites, looking at different places, but 70% are never actually published. They're filled in-house. They're filled through other ways. 85 of them percent our jobs are filled from networking. Even another 15% that are publicized are also still filled by networking. So rather high percentage. But it kind of makes sense when you think about it. People are going to hire someone they know or through a reference. It's easier to make that connection. So if someone can say, yes, they're good, they're a hard worker, they get things done, there's no issues or challenges with that person, it's natural to want to hire someone who is a known, has some kind of a known experience. So it's just a natural occurrence. So your chance yourself, your percentage goes up 40%. So as you network, as you reach out to people and make those connections, your chance of being hired goes up by about 40%. Pretty significant. I was really surprised by those numbers. A lot of benefits here. You've probably heard through your careers just those different benefits of networking, making different connections, growing your own brand. Are people even aware of who you are? Great way to share thoughts, ideas, examples, get to know people, learn yourself, but also help teach. There's certainly accessing new jobs, but it's also how do you get career advice? Great way to tap in and just say, I'm really kind of stuck here. I don't know what to do in this case. I don't know what to do with maybe this project at work. I'm trying to figure out what's next in my career. So a lot of great benefits in terms of networking. But we need to touch a little bit on the basics of networking itself. So I'm going to talk a little bit briefly about nodes, relationships, and clusters. So our nodes, that's us, that's the people. We're the ones that we're trying to connect through those relationships. And typically we have our cluster of friends, our grouping of friends, people we know, people we work with, PMI, UK, different ways that we're familiar with each other and connect. So that's just the basics. I'm going to come back to that in the 2 slides and talk more and expand this model. But what's interesting is you may have heard the 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon. It's a little bit dated reference now, but it was a joke going around, maybe 20 years ago about any person can connect to the actor Kevin Bacon through 6 people. It started out as a joke, and then all of a sudden people started realizing there's actually some truth to this. We are much more connected to each other than we think. And basically the theory is that you can connect within 5 people, meaning we have different connections. We go through a friend, we can maybe connect to person A. Other people, we can maybe, a friend of a friend can connect us to person B. A friend of a friend of a friend can get us to person C. And we can actually connect. And, maybe some of the connections are not the strongest, but we can connect only needing a total of 5 other people to get to a particular connection. And it was interesting. Facebook did some analysis on their links within their own organization, and they came up with, I think the average was like 3.2 connections for everyone in their Facebook environment that they were able to get to any person else within Facebook. So there's definitely some truth to it. Definitely some, it's much a smaller number than most people realize. But there is an element to really help make this work better. Certainly, as I mentioned, if we're only in our own cluster, we're only in our own network of friends, we kind of run out of options pretty quick. It's when we take a chance, it's when we try something new, it's when we have a new experience where we connect to another person, completely unrelated, maybe slightly unrelated to what we do, and that opens us up to their network. So now all of a sudden that one connection could bring in tens or hundreds of people through their network in terms of making those connections. If we expand it even further, this is what it might look like. Different clusters here. Just a few people can all of a sudden connect us to hundreds and thousands of people around the world. That's part of one of my networks, PMI. That's how I've been able to make connections through people, through chapters in different countries. My daughters, when they were younger, they thought I was part of the government or something because I always knew someone in a country. And of course, all I do is I reach out to the local PMI chapter and, hi, I'm coming into town. We would love to meet. We'd love to connect. What do you think? And, so I wind up making those friends and making those connections. So very powerful. We've got to jump those clusters. We've got to jump into other networks, meet people you wouldn't normally expect to meet. That's going to make a really big difference there. But I am talking about different network types. So what exactly am I talking about? There are 2 network types that there are plenty of books out there. So I don't want to overly spend too much time on these. The first one is around, here's a person, I don't know, an Elon Musk or some important or some other person over here. How do I get to that person? Here's a hiring manager at a company. So a lot of books about how do I tap into a network, find someone who's connected, find someone, but we're not going to cover that one today. Again, lots of material that already exists. A corollary or related one is I want to meet people at that company. I want to work there. I want to see what it's like there. How do I find people who work there? Again, there's books out there, there's websites. I didn't want to duplicate that information. The one, though, today I really want to talk about is it's almost like playing a deck of cards. I have certain network of people already. Well, let's see where they go. I don't know where they're going to go. I'm not trying to go in a certain position. I'm not trying to go to a certain person or a place or a company. I'm just going to allow it to unfold and see what happens and see where it goes. And that's what I mean by proactive networking. I've got my network. I've got friends in it. I've got connections. I'm going to reach out and see what happens and see where it goes. So let me give you an example, though, of what I mean. I'm going to start building out this early set of network. And again, when this was happening at the time, I had no idea where it was going to go. I had no idea where it was leading to. But it's only when I went back in hindsight and said, wow, I can see this path. I can see this connection to see how I wound up where I did. So we're going to start off. Very funny chance encounter. I met Jim Snyder. I am fortunate. He lives pretty close to me. We're maybe, I don't know, 15, 20 minutes away. And he's one of the co-founders of PMI. PMI headquarters, I live nearby as well. And Jim is part of the local Delaware Valley chapter. So I had an opportunity as I moved into the area, got to know Jim, had some ideas on improving the chapter, went and had a conversation with Jim. Here's Jim on the left-hand side, sitting in my living room with my cat, or my kitchen with the cat. On the right here, this is the foundation of PMI, Jim's dining room table at his house. But we were joking with Jim one time. We said, we should take this table, put it in PMI headquarters, because it's, that's where all the original PMI documents were signed. And he laughs about it too. He's a pretty funny guy, good sense of humor. But as part of meeting Jim back in 2010, and then off and on closer to 2015, through that time, just got to know Jim. It was just part of being in the local chapter. So I'm glad I stepped out and joined that chapter. Come in 2015, there was a conference down in Orlando, Florida, and I was there. Jim was there, and bumped into Jim. We're walking down the hall, and he goes, "Oh, there's Walter over there. You need to meet Walter. He's a really interesting guy." So Walter Ginevri came over, introduced me to Walter. Had no idea who he was. This is before at the time he was to later become one of the board members of the PMI Educational Foundation. But what was amazing is we sat there and talked about Dante's Inferno, of all things. Walter's very passionate about it. He had written a presentation of aligning project management to Dante's Inferno. So just fascinating conversation. And what I took away from this meeting, from this encounter, was the importance of talking, having that conversation, being allowing yourself to meet people you may not normally talk with. So it's walking up to someone. Hello, my name is. If someone's going to introduce you, be willing to go over and just say hello, get to know people. I have a phrase, I'll talk to anyone, anywhere. And people like Nigel and others, and they saw me doing that when I was over there in PMI UK in September. I'm happy to talk to anyone because I never know where it's going to go. And that to me is the excitement of that unknown. Now, what was happening after I met these folks and whatnot, there was an opportunity to go to Rome. There was a conference over in Rome, and Walter is from Milan. So I said, wow, if I'm going to go to Rome, I reached out to Walter, right? I met him a few years earlier, about 2 years earlier. And I said, hey, Walter, if you hope you don't mind me asking, the hotel they wanted us to stay was very expensive, something like about 350 pounds a night. And I said, yeah, I don't feel right spending our chapter's money on that high of a number. I said, is there maybe another hotel? I'm looking at some of these other hotels. What do you know about the area? And he said, oh, I'm staying at this other little pensione. Why don't you stay here? And you needed a local bank account in Europe in order to make the arrangements. They didn't really take credit cards. And I said, yeah, okay. He helped me out. He arranged to pay for my deposit. I paid him back in cash. And at the conference, I had an opportunity to do a co-presentation with Isabelina George and Jackie Glenn. Never met them before, but it wound up Isabelina was staying in our same hotel. So I had a chance to walk around Rome, walk around the conference, get to know her in Rome. She introduced me to another person, Louis Sibra Colo. For those who may have met Luis, he was the region mentor there for a while in Europe. But at the time, he was just like me, another project manager, and got to know Louis, and he and I were walking around and spent some time. A couple other things I'm going to share. I also met a person, Joanna Ademski from Poland, And a lot of times I like to just take picture of people's badges. So I have their information. I can find them later. Kind of jogs my memory when I go back through the photos. But I'm going to come back to Joanne a little bit later. But I did meet her at this same conference. Part of what I learned here is a few other techniques, certainly talking, but I also learned this concept of what I call ladder technique. So let me explain this one. Before I went to this conference, I said, there's a lot of chapters and branches. We don't do that in our chapter. We have a very large geographic chapter, maybe half the size of the UK. Well, we can't get to all the different areas in our chapter. So maybe branches make sense. We should, how about I go over to Rome and learn more about this? So I talked to my chapter, the Delaware Valley chapter, and they said, well, it only makes sense if you're going to speak at the conference. And I don't know if they were trying to keep me from going, but we had already passed the date so that I could not sign up as a speaker. But I got smart and I said, Walter works at PMI EF. So he gave me some contacts. I just went to PMI Educational Foundation and said, are you looking for a speaker? Anything that we could help out with what you're doing there at EF? I'm happy to go speak for you over in Rome. And they go, great, we would love you to go, but we can't pay you. We can't pay for your trip. I said, no problem. I went back to my chapter and said, hey, guess what? PMI EF said they're going to have me speak. Now, they didn't say that yet. They wanted me to confirm I was able to go. But I went back to my chapter and said, yep, I'm already signed up. I'm going to be a speaker. I'm ready to go. They said, oh, in that case, if you're going to be a speaker, our chapter will fund your trip. I went back to the PMI Education Foundation and said, guess what? The chapter is going to pay for my trip. I can now go. And got the approval on both sides, and I went on the trip. A little side note, I actually spent less money at PMI Education, at the Rome conference than I did in the US when I normally go to the conferences here, because I reached out to Walter and I stayed at that pensione, which led to Isabellina, which led to Louise, meeting those different people. So this laddering technique was very valuable it's kind of like switching back as you're driving up a hill or something. Don't always take the first answer as the final answer. Take it as a challenge. What else could I do? What are some alternatives? How can I be creative? And that's how I wound up going to Rome back in 2017. Now, later on that year, Isabellina reached out to me and she said, in our Portugal chapter, we need a closing keynote speaker. We're kind of a little behind. I'm not quite sure, what we're going to be able to do. And our theme is the fourth industrial revolution. I said, oh, okay. I don't really know much about that, but yes, I'll do it. And of course, I worked every weekend for about 2 months trying to write this presentation, my first formal international presentation. I was very nervous. But it was great because I reached out to my friend Louise and said, hey, I need you to help me. What is the audience? What do they want to hear? What's the sense of humor? How can I make sure this is successful? So sometimes it helps taking that risk and saying, yes, I'm going to do something. By the way, this is Isabellina and my daughter, Jessica. She was getting ready to go to university. And I said, well, why don't you come over and see what business meetings are all about? And of course, she had a chance to go to Portugal, so she was very happy to say yes. But the message was, say yes to something. Give it a try. Put yourself out there. I had no idea what I was going to write. I had no idea how I was going to tie robots and industrial revolution to project management. But if any of you have seen my presentation, Adapt, Adopt, and Thrive, that's what it morphed into. It's something I've been using around the world for the last 4 or 5 years now. So I'm really glad I really put myself out there and took that challenge on to write that presentation. Because what was interesting is the next year, I was not on the board anymore. No, I'm sorry. Yeah, I was a past president. And I said, well, I still want to go, and I want to go to the international conference. Our chapter was not going to pay for it. Now, yeah, that was okay. I went and received the information I needed. But I went to the Berlin conference the next year and started meeting people, talking to people. And I wound up meeting some folks here on the bottom left. That's my wife on the left. But I also met Carrie here, where she was from the Norway chapter. And I think I wound up having something like 10 different offers to speak at different chapters around the world. On the top right here, this is a funny photo. Again, in hindsight, I realized what it is. Here's Jim Snyder sitting on the front right. There's my wife. To my right is Walter. Across from Walter is his wife. There's Isabelina and her husband. There's Louis. And we also have in the back Pedro. He's going to come in later on. You're going to hear me talk a bit about him. But just kind of an interesting meeting. We all went out to a beer hall one time and just had a good time. We just you never know who you're going to meet. We were not planning for dinner. We all met in the hallway and went out as a group to dinner. So a lot of the similar people here. Part of what I've learned here is asking for what you want. I had to go there and I was very uncomfortable to ask people, can I speak at your chapter? How do I speak at your chapter? How do I sign up? But I had to know what I wanted to do. This was something I wanted to try. I wanted to reach out, and I had to be comfortable. I had to practice my speech. How am I going to ask? How do I network with people and do it in a way that they'd be interested? And like I said, to me, it was a surprise, the amount of response that I received. And certainly Isabelina, Louis, and others were saying, yes, you want Mike to speak. He does really, really good. So, excuse me, having that support was also very valuable. That meeting was very important, though, because it led to, as I mentioned, Carrie in the previous photo with Norway. They said, Mike, I'd love you to come over here. The only thing is we're talking about large projects. I went, oh, okay. I don't really do large construction, building, dams, hydro plant, whatever it might be. I don't do those types of projects. But that was okay. We had some conversations. But meanwhile, my daughters dance at the time. They were still in not even undergrad. We say here high school. They were dancing, and I always helped out. I helped the school with working the doors, letting parents in and whatnot. So I got to know people, and I would talk to people. Remember, I talked to anyone, anywhere. I met one of the mothers. She wound up introducing me to her husband, who became one of the U.S. Marshals, the head of the U.S. Marshals in the Eastern District here. He was actually appointed by the president and the Congress to be the head of the Marshals. But I just know him as Eric. We became friends, and a good person, a really good person. As I was sharing with him, talking to Norway, they might be some interest there. Well, Eric lives maybe 20 minutes away from my house, and he goes, oh, you need to talk to Ken. Like, Ken, who the heck is Ken? He said, oh, my neighbor, he lives 3 houses away. You should talk to Ken Braithwaite. He was just appointed to the U.S. ambassador to Norway. Like, you're kidding me. Like, I thought they all live in Washington, D.C. He said, no. He said they're just down the street. They're very good friends. They go to sporting events and whatnot. He was currently in Norway. He had recently been appointed. And so Eric made arrangements for me to meet Ken. We invited him to also speak in Norway and got him on the speaking list. Now, the only problem is, as I said, I didn't have a topic to talk about in Norway, but I wanted to go. Ken's going to be there. So I talked to the chapter and I said, well, what else can I do? Is there something I can do? And they came back and they said, well, the person who was going to talk about the dams can't make it. Can you talk about dams? And I said, well, I can't talk about current projects, but we came up with, can I talk about the Hoover Dam in the United States down out by Las Vegas? And I said, sure, happy to do the research. So I bought some books, I even flew out to the Hoover Dam to do a tour just so I could learn enough about it so I could speak about it. I was out in California for a business trip, and very inexpensive to fly over to the Hoover Dam and go see it. And it's amazing history, by the way. On a side note, there's connections to the mafia, to Las Vegas, to the Depression, to water reclamation issues. Fascinating history. There's so many elements all tied into the Hoover Dam. So I had to create this presentation. I knew nothing about this, but now I need to come over and be an authority on the Hoover Dam. So I took that risk. But again, it was looking for opportunity. It's being observant, reaching out, making connections, sharing information. Another little side note from that same dance. Again, I didn't know this. One of the other fathers, I met my daughter, was dancing with one of this girl, Ashana Shyamalan, and got to know her mother, Bhavna Shyamalan. And the father would always like sneak in last minute to go to the thing and to go to the performances, and I'd help him find his seat and everything. And I'm like, well, who is this guy? I keep showing up late. This guy, Minosh Shyamalan. Well, found out it's M. Night Shyamalan. He's a movie producer. He did this Sixth Sense, Airbenders, a whole bunch of other movies. He wound up being my neighbor about a mile down the street. Didn't know it, but got to know him and his family. And, just, again, a funny connection that through dance that I would never have come across this person in his network. So yeah, networking is a funny thing, but let's move on. Let's keep talking about what came out of that, the Berlin conference. Do you remember I talked about Joanna? I showed you her badge a few slides ago. Well, this is Joanna and her husband, Alex, and my wife again. My wife loves traveling with me when she can. They wanted me to speak in Poland. So I went over and spoke at their conference, had a blast, had a great time. Learned a lot about similar things, speaking up, talking, take some risk, ask for what you want. But what was interesting is Bulgaria heard about me and they said, wait a minute, if you're going to Poland, can you come to Sofia? Our conference is only 2 days sooner. I said, great. Where's Bulgaria? I had no idea where it was on a map. Typical American, right? We don't know our geography. I hadn't had the opportunity to really learn much about that area, but I said yes before I even knew where the country was, because the conference was only in something like 4 or 5 weeks later. So I had to do something quick. And I said, absolutely, yes, let me step up and do that. So I went to the Bulgarian conference, had an amazing time, met 2 interesting people. One person, Roman Reznikov, he's from the Ukraine chapter. He was one of the other speakers, so he invited me to come to Ukraine to speak. I'll talk about that in a minute. But I also met this gentleman here on the right, Khaled Hamdi, one of the other speakers. Just happened to have a really good rapport, had some great humor, joked a bit. And he says, oh, you should come to one of our conferences over in Dubai. Yeah, sure, happy to go to Dubai. But I'll come back to that in a moment. But again, it's tapping into all the things that I've done. It's, speaking to people, it's taking risks, it's looking for opportunities. Because with the Dubai conference, I didn't know this, it was actually sponsored by the Crown Prince of Dubai. He actually comes to the conference, him and his entourage, and there was 2,500 people. This thing was huge. And again, kind of fell into it, didn't realize what I was getting myself into. And as I was at the conference for 2 days, I happened to notice Khaled's up on stage talking to the prince. I'm like, well, that's kind of interesting. And later on, I said, hey, Khaled, like what's going on? Like, how do you know this guy? What's the connection? And he goes, oh, I guess I never told you. Now, remember, this is a year now. We've been talking with each other, interacting for over a year. He goes, yeah, I'm one of the advisors to the royal family, one of the 3 advisors. I met the guy in Bulgaria, of all places. Who would have suspected to go find him in Bulgaria? He didn't even know who he was. And even at lunch, a little side story, met this guy, Kevin, at lunch in Dubai. And I said, he's from Scotland. And we had a great conversation talking about people and agile and contracts and just, oh, great conversation. So after about an hour, I said, so Kevin, why are you here from Scotland? What brought you to Dubai? He said, well, I live here. I'm like, oh, okay. Well, what do you do? What do you do here? He goes, oh, well, Khaled. Yeah. He goes, well, I'm one of the other advisors to the royal family. So on one trip, I meet two of the advisors to the royal family just because I'm going out there talking to people. Walked up to him at lunch and, hi, how are you? He's standing by himself. Hi, I'd like to just introduce myself and say hello. Just kind of crazy things like that. So being curious, another very key attribute of proactive networking. Listening to understand, as he's asking me questions, he wants to learn about me. So I'm kind of asking him some questions. And when I started asking about himself, that's how I found out who he was. Certainly being curious, asking why. Could we do this? Can we talk? And just a lot of these techniques, a lot of these just real simple things in the right place at the right time. It's amazing what those connections can lead to. So let's continue. As I mentioned, the Ukraine also asked me to speak there. I had an absolutely fantastic time. I was there in 2019, and I went back again last year, 2021, in October. Certainly very sad to hear the situation there. And I've done several presentations for them. But again, great people, great food. Really enjoyed my 2 trips out there. Can't wait to go back when things are resolved. Between Roman and Voldemir and Ross and different Roman, Ivanenko. Fantastic time and just learning the history. And again, these are places that when I grew up as a child, I was never allowed to go to because of the Cold War and visas and all these other things. I was never going to go. In my mind, that was never allowed. So it was exciting to be able to go visit these places. And again, I took a risk. What was I going to do with the language? I don't know. Now, a lot of this has led me to that same conference. I remember I said I met Pedro. So Pedro, he said, hey, you know what? I need you to, I'm speaking at the PMI UK. Can you listen in? I like your feedback on my presentation. Because he and I have been interacting for the last several years, asking for some advice and some coaching and feedback on his product. So we had gotten to know each other. So I said, yeah, happy to sit in, listen, give you some feedback on your presentation on a new take on earned value. So as I listened to the conference, I wound up doing the networking session, which I hope you do here today. I wound up meeting Merv White. And we started having a conversation. I was telling him about how I speak. And he goes, oh, can you speak for our chapter? Yeah, happy to do that. So I wound up doing a presentation over the summer and seemed like it was well received. So we talked about coming over in September and doing a workshop that I do, a Lego workshop, a half-day session. So this past September, you may have heard, I was over in Birmingham, then up here. I was up here in Belfast, then Birmingham, and then down in London. And ran 3 of the workshops and got to know people like Nigel Smith and Mike and others. And I just had an amazing time meeting different people. And of course, me with my funny luck, my weird luck, it was about a week after the Queen had passed away. So I wound up being over there for some of the activities that were going on at the time. When I was in Belfast, I literally passed King Charles on the highway. He had landed and was coming into town, and we were literally driving in a cab going to the airport, and we passed him on the highway. The closest I'll ever get to royalty, I guess. But yeah, it's just one of those funny moments in time, funny moments in history that, couldn't have planned it, couldn't have tried to make it happen, and just happened to be in the right place at the right time. Oops, there we go. Yeah. So part of that was, again, asking for your want, because I said, hey, let's see if we can make this happen, and taking those risks and coming over. I also, in that same week in September, I spoke over in Portugal. Did some presentations for them. I got a chance to meet Ricardo Vargas. My boss had told me he worked with Ricardo and I should introduce myself and say hello. Really nice guy. We hit it off amazingly. He and I were both speakers on Friday, I think it was, in the conference. And, we just really got to know each other, had some great time. And I don't know if you just saw last week, Ricardo Vargas just became a PMI fellow. Very unexpected. I didn't know enough about his background, and now he's considered a PMI fellow. So it's you never know who you're going to wind up meeting in these networking and these connections. So here's just a simple sample of what happens when you network with people. I mean, look at this connection. I never could have predicted it way back in 2010. Different times I spoke it up was going to lead to this very fun and crazy and chaotic type of a network. Part of it is making sure we're using different networking tools, things like LinkedIn, right? There's 830 million members in LinkedIn. I've got my code here. I've got it at my last slide. So if you want to link in with me, link in, let's connect, let's talk. There's certainly other tools like Meetup. I didn't realize how big Meetup is, 52 million members around the world. 193 countries. Hadn't really looked at it, and it's amazing to see how much it's grown over time. Xing or Crossing in Germany, German language. I was surprised how large that network is becoming. It's just interesting to see what's been happening in the network space. Even the Ukraine, I thought this was interesting. It just appeared October 10th, where certain links trying to help Ukrainians finding jobs. And again, looking at some of the stats, about 4.2 million people left Ukraine. It just astounds me to think about that. And with that, 600,000 have found jobs already, but there's still 3 million open positions. And how do we make that connection? So one of the EU, they were opening up this talent pool to say, how do we connect EU with Ukrainians as part of this effort? It's just amazing. There's a lot of networking activities and tools out there when you take a look for them. But as we're starting to wrap up here, I wanted just to share some thoughts, because part of networking, the important thing to understand is there's 3 ways you're going to connect with people. And this is the hard reality, unfortunately. There might be a reason you meet someone. There's something that happens. It could be tragic, could be exciting, could just be for a moment. You meet someone and it's kind of like the Crown Prince of Dubai. Yeah, probably aren't going to meet him again. He's not on my address book or anything. But, had a chance to meet those folks and kind of, have that opportunity in a very unexpected way. You might know people for a season. I'm thinking of M. Night Shyamalan with Binoche and Bhavna and all that. We met them because of our daughter's dancing. Haven't seen him since. That's okay. We've got to know him and the family for about 4 or 5 years. Enjoyed our conversations, enjoyed meeting him in the hall, but there's really no reason for us to interact now. And that's okay. I have to be comfortable understanding things like that happen. And then there's people you're going to meet for a lifetime that no matter what, you're going to be there. They're going to be there for you. They're just those people that 10, 20, 30 years later, you're just still interacting with. And that's what I love when I meet people, especially in that lifetime space as well. There's certainly some folks from the PMI UK chapter. I won't embarrass them, but there's certainly people there. I know we're going to be talking for the next several years and decades, hopefully. Hopefully that'd be a much more of a lifetime. But it's understanding that sometimes, you may make connections that may not last permanently, and that's okay. People ask me, well, how do you keep the relationship warm? Well, sometimes it's just reach out frequently, drop them a note. Maybe something happens to them in LinkedIn. Hey, congratulations on the new job. If they link into me, they're tracking what's happening with what I'm doing, because I'll advertise different things. I have to put a note out today about this conference. And sometimes you come across an article. I did that with a friend of mine, Walter O'Brien, a real sharp guy who used to be a producer of a show, The Scorpion, and he was going to do some work with Elon Musk. So I read an article. I'm like, hey, Walter, how you doing? It's been a year since we chatted. Hey, I saw this article. I'm just curious, are you still working on this? Sometimes it's just simple things like that. And a lot of times too, it's funny. I'll connect as where we left off, even if it's a year or two later. Just pick up the conversation. Hey, how's such and such going on, or how's this happening? If you can remember, and I go back and I look through my email chains or my LinkedIn or my WhatsApp, and oh yeah, we talked about these 3 things. So I'll bring that up as part of kind of just continuing that conversation. Now, I don't do it with every single person every single day, but you never know. There's times people come back and interact, and hey, we connected here, there, or whatnot. Like Joanna, remember in Poland, I had met her at one conference and didn't talk to her, and all of a sudden, 3 years later, we're talking again. Great, happy to do that. I'm actually going to Poland next month for work. Poland, France, and Germany. And as part of that, I reached out to Joanna and her husband, Alex. They just had a baby, and I said, hey, I got to come see the baby. Things like that. I'm just, reconnecting with people as I travel. So in conclusion here, just remember, why is it important to network? What are we doing? What's the value? The numbers are incredibly high. It's something we have to do as our careers, especially now. It's just becoming even more and more important to do that. Remember that clustering. It's getting out of your cluster, getting out of your space, moving into something else. That's what's going to really expand your network. Don't be afraid to meet people. I talk to people on the train, at the airport. I remember talking to a gentleman in line at Boots in England. And my friend from England was just telling me, she says, how do you do that? We just don't do that in London. We just don't talk to each other in line. I'm like, I don't know. I'm just curious. Hi, how are you doing? Let's say hello. You never know what's going to happen. And then certainly we're much more connected to people than you realize. So reach out. You never know where that network is going to take you. You never know what the connections are really going to be. And certainly as a project managers, that's how we find our new jobs. That's how we're going to grow professionally. It's talking to people, interacting. Well, what did you do? What experiences do you have? What background do you have? What networks do you have? What connections can you help me with? What can I help you with? And it's great. You find ideas both from project managers as well as people who have nothing to do with project management. And start now. Don't wait until you need your network. Don't wait until something happens. Keep constantly working your network. The holidays are coming up. A great time just to start going through your network and your LinkedIn and other connections and email. Who have I not talked to in a while? Let me just, hey, hi, how you doing? How's life? Hey, you got some time? Let's chat over the holidays. Just kind of reach out to some folks you may not have talked to in a while. I learned about the ladder technique. Don't take no for an answer. Being creative, saying yes, taking those risks. You never know what's going to come out of it. I said yes in Portugal, and here I am talking to a crown prince of Dubai. Just weird, crazy loops as I'm connecting through Bulgaria, of all places. So talk to anyone, talk to any location, be curious, ask why, be observant. I'm going to share a quick little side note about being observant. I went to this presentation about flying at the local airport, and they were just talking about what happens when a president or somebody important flies through the U.S. airspace. But as he's doing his presentation and setting up, I noticed he was showing his file structure, his typical folder on his computer before he started. And one of his slides said, slides for doing a tour. I went, oh. I said, so afterwards I walked up, hey, thank you for your presentation. Found it interesting. And I said, are you still doing tours at the air traffic control? He goes, oh, yeah, absolutely. Come on down. So on my September trip, before I went out to the UK and Portugal, my wife and I, we did a tour of the Philadelphia Air Traffic Control Tower. And it was amazing. I mean, it was a space, something I didn't know anything about. He walked us through the training room, the terminals, and it's perfect timing on a Friday. President Biden was flying up the coast to go from DC up to his house in Delaware. Well, Philadelphia is close to Delaware, so Philadelphia handles clearing the traffic for his flight and his entourage to come up. So here we are in the control room watching the president flying with his entourage as they're clearing the airspace for him. Just, funny, crazy timing. And in the tower, they're showing us where they're going to route us on the going from the gate to get out to the runway. Well, here's the alleys we're going to take. Here's what the traffic looks like. Here's the weather. Here's what it looks like going over to Europe at the time. And again, it was just an hour total for the tour, but just amazing. It was just amazing opportunity to because I was paying attention and happened to notice and went up there with my big mouth and said, "Hey, I'm just curious." So take those chances. What's the worst? He can say no. So what? In this case, they happen to say yes. So what's next? I don't know yet. I don't know where things are going to go, but certainly the PMI UK. Well, guess what? Here I am back again, talking again. Love to come back next year as well. Hopefully, we could work something out. We've been chatting about it on the side. Portugal, they've asked me to come back. Belgium wants me to come over there. There's a company that I met that they're located in different places, and they said, "Hey, we'd like you to come do some work." I did a podcast for the Data Transformation Lab. I was also in Cork in Ireland right before I went to Belfast. I landed in Dublin because it was just easier to do that. Met a gentleman from the Data Transformation Lab, and I did a podcast about a week ago. So that's going to be coming out in a week. Just did a presentation last week for University of London South Bank. Our MBA class, I found out we're going to South Africa in May. So hopefully I'm going to make some connections there. Love to get back to the Ukraine. What was also interesting is, this just came in too. I had an article written about me at the university I teach at, and Columbia University, the graduate program, saw the article and they said, "Hey, we'd love you to come up and run a class for us up at Columbia University for their teachers." So pretty great opportunity. I'm going to be doing that next month. And what I did is when I found out about South Africa, I went back to my notes as I was preparing for this presentation. I was looking at my past photos, and guess what I found? I found a badge in Rome. I took this photo in Rome of Karen. I don't remember. We didn't connect afterwards, but she's from South Africa chapter, Cape Town. I reached out to Karen and said, "Hey, you may not remember me, but we met in Rome back in 2017. Guess what? I'm coming to South Africa. You still involved in the chapter? Can I ask you some questions about Cape Town?" And she, "Oh, absolutely. Let's get together. Let's talk about it." So now I have a local contact for Cape Town. Great way for me to get some information, maybe some restaurant information. So you never know. Things that I took this photo in 2017, and it took 5 years before I'm going to use that connection. It's just funny how things like that connect. And like I said, I'm going over to Poland next month, so I'm going to be reaching out to my colleagues over there and just kind of reconnecting with them. But with that, I want to, again, thank you for the invitation to come speak today. Love to open up for questions, comments, anything that you'd like to talk about, ask about, or connect about. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mike. I don't know if you can hear me.
Yep. Yeah, you're good.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much for this insightful presentation. It was never short of the expectation, and that's great. While to everyone, you can start to drop your questions so that we can Mike can address them before we go to practice what has been preached. Going back to the networking section where we can interact and get to meet interesting people. Hopefully, I saw Merv's comment that he was happy to meet Mike here via the Open Networking app. And anyone that meets with him, people that meet with him end up doing presentations. So you might be lucky to meet with Merv, and I hope that'll be an interesting one for you. Just a question while we're waiting for others to drop in their questions. To you, Mike, I was thinking, there's this conversation around your personality traits and how it's easier for some set of personalities to be able to network or connect with people and all that. Uh, I would like to ask, do you have special critical advice or recommendation for the introverts that are believed to, be a bit laid back? They don't like to put themselves out there like you advise, and sometimes they're mindful of getting rejections and all. For the introverted person, what would you advise the best approach in trying to network with people?
It's interesting. That question comes up quite a bit. Oh, by the way, I have dogs, and they just came in from their walk, so I may get visited here any minute. Two puppies are both 9 months old, so I apologize if they join the conversation. From an introverted person, part of it is I think there's still ways to perhaps connect maybe offline, through LinkedIn, through email, through other opportunities to reach out. It gives that person a little more time to think about it, kind of think about how they like to approach it. Unfortunately, networking is about connecting and talking to people. So sometimes it's doing a little bit of homework or pre-work, looking at a person, looking at their information. What do I have in common? Because introverted people, if they talk about something they like, they get rather energetic, or at least from my experience. So it's trying to find that connection, that common thing to talk about. And I think that helps introverted people not feel as though it's, wow, I'm talking to someone about something I know nothing about. So one of my daughters is an introvert, one's an extrovert. And she talks about, she says, sometimes I just need energy. I need to step back and, kind of take a pause. That's okay. If you're at a networking event, maybe step out in the hallway, maybe just kind of, go sit in the side for a little bit, just to kind of recharge, refresh, come back, network a little bit, maybe step away, and just kind of look for a way to balance that energy need of when you need that break, when you need the pause.
Interesting. Thanks for the response. Yeah. So while we're wrapping up this session, the link to the recording and the slide is available. I think Maeve has dropped a link to that. You can all access this presentation from there. Also, for the PMI members, everybody, we advise, or we plead that you please take the survey. And for PMI members that need this for the PDU, you get the PDU after you the survey. So please take the survey. It helps. The feedback is important to us, and I know Mike would like to get the feedback as well.
Yeah, please, good or bad. You won't offend me. I did see one question I'd like to touch on briefly. How do you deal or process approaching people and the response is cold, or you feel rejected? Yes, that's happened many, many, many times. What I found, I just get comfortable with, you walk up, hi, how you doing? Or you say something and you get the cold shoulder, you get the look, and you say, thank you for your time. Turn around and walk away. Or, oh, my apologies, or something, and move on. Because they're going to forget you anyway. So what? It doesn't matter. I've just become, believe me, it took me years to learn how to do that. But finally, I just said, you know what? So what? If they don't want to talk, hey, have a nice day. Have a nice, whatever. Enjoy the conference. Enjoy your dinner, or whatever it might be. Or, yeah, just be nice, be polite, say thank you, sorry to bother, and turn around and walk away. So it's much easier than you think. I'm doing a MBA class right now. We had an exercise of, we have to purposely go out and try to get people to say no to us, just so we'd be comfortable with it. Now, me, that was easy. I had the most, things doing it because I'm comfortable doing that. But we had some folks in the class that have never tried to get a no from somebody, and it was fun. It was fun, some of the stories they were telling. But it's a great exercise to try. Go talk to people expecting to get a no. Like, I asked a lady at a restaurant, hey, can I come work behind the bar and serve drinks for you? She goes, yeah, sure, come on back. And I'm like, no, I want the no, I want the no. And and it was surprising. All these times people kept saying yes more than I thought they'd say no. But that was part of the exercise is, oh, people say yes a lot more than we think it. We think we're going to get a no, when in fact the percentage is higher to get a yes or to get some other type of an answer. So great skill to practice.
Yeah,
And real quick to Mer's comment, yeah, I think networking should be a power skill. I think it's a life skill, so I think it's even more so. Love to see that taught in schools. Imagine teaching things like that in our high schools and secondary schools and whatnot.
Yeah. Okay. Any other question?
Got to have one more question before we go. Can't just go. Oh, here we go. Let's see if it's a question. Popular saying that everyone listens to what's in it for me. Yep. How do you network if you feel that you do not have something or value to give?
Yeah.
I think it
question.
doesn't necessarily have to be value. I'll go up to people. If somebody, well, ties are not as common as they used to be. But if a guy has a really cool tie, wow, that's a cool tie. Is that a present? Did somebody give it to you? Or a pair of shoes or something? Or sometimes if a lady has a really nice scarf or something, wow, it's a nice scarf. Where'd you get it at? Sometimes it could be as simple and benign as something like that. It's looking for a reason to approach somebody and just say hello. If talking in line, like I said, one time I just it was as simple as, oh, hey, excuse me for bothering you. I'm curious, how long have you been standing here? And I've been standing here for a while. Okay. Is this normal? Is this typical? And very, very simple thing. Next thing you know, we start going and having a conversation and talking about the difference between the UK and the US health systems. Interesting conversation. Wasn't looking for it, wasn't preparing for it. Just because I was asking about how long was he standing in line, and had a great 5-minute conversation. But it was one conversation, never met the guy again, but had a fascinating conversation. So it doesn't always have to be this big, massive value thing that I'm bringing. It just could be, hey, I saw this article you read or you wrote. Oh, I saw you got a new job. Hey, congratulations on the new job. Can I ask you about that? I've never heard of a title like that, or I'm not familiar with that. Do you mind if could we have 5 minutes for me to understand what that job is? Looking for something specific to have that conversation. That's that creative side.
Oh, interesting. Thank you as always, Mike. Yeah. It seems to me there are no other questions to answer here. That should be the end of this session. And now we want everyone to make the efforts, at least from here, to practice what has been said. And I guess when you get to the slide, you can take the points, the key points from the presentation while we proceed to the networking session. I look forward to networking with great and interesting people as well. And we hope to see
I'll be there
too. We hope to see everyone again in our next event coming up, I believe next year, if I'm correct. PMI UK chapter, our website is www.pmi.org.uk. You can go up there and see what we have and get to join the chapter as well. Thank you, everyone, once again for making time out for this, from wherever you're joining us from. Have a great afternoon and see you at the networking session.